Hi, I'm Vanessa Lee, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes your biggest battles aren't fought in boardrooms, but at the dinner table, with family. I'm 35 now, but 15 years ago, I started working in my parents' tiny electronics repair store in downtown Seattle. My father, Ken, opened the shop in the late 80s, pouring every spare hour into keeping it afloat. The business barely paid the bills, but it was his legacy. My older brother, Derek, was always the golden child. He was the star student, the one who earned scholarships and went off to Stanford to study finance. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the kid who stayed behind to help Dad while chipping away at my electrical engineering degree at the University of Washington. "Vanessa, you're selling yourself short," Derek would tell me whenever he came home for holidays. "You should be out there making something big happen." But I believed there was something worth fighting for in that little shop. While Derek was off perfecting case studies, I was soldering circuit boards and noticing a huge opportunity in the consumer electronics market. During my last year at UW, I designed our first in-house product, a smart diagnostics device for quickly identifying issues in consumer gadgets. It wasn't flashy tech, but it was affordable and incredibly useful for small repair shops. Dad didn't quite get it at first, but when other local stores began placing orders, he finally cracked a smile. "Maybe you've got the right instincts after all, kiddo," he said, pride glimmering in his eyes. Those words were everything to me. If only I'd known how fragile that approval would be. I poured myself into growing the business. 14-hour days became normal. Derek was thriving at a high-powered private equity firm in New York, while I was transforming Dad's modest repair shop into a thriving hardware solutions company. Mom watched it all with gentle worry. "Don't work yourself into the ground, Vanessa," she'd say, delivering takeout to my workbench. "You deserve a life too." But I was driven, partly by a vision for the company, partly by a quiet need to prove myself. 5 years after we launched our new products, we crossed $1,200,000 in annual revenue. That's when Derek suddenly took an interest in the family business. He came home, quit his Wall Street job, and dropped a bombshell at dinner. "I think it's time I step in and help run things," he declared. "With my connections and business background, we could scale faster than you ever imagined." Dad's face lit up at Derek's words. "That's wonderful, champ. We could use your professional touch around here." I sat there, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth, struggling to comprehend what was happening. The company I had built from scraps was being gift-wrapped and handed to my brother. Still, I bit back my protests and tried to be the bigger person. Derek was promptly named co-CEO alongside me, despite having zero experience in hardware development or manufacturing. Dad insisted it would look good for investors to have someone with Derek's Wall Street background leading the company, so I focused on engineering and product development, while Derek took charge of marketing and investor relations. The next 5 years became a masterclass in contradictions. I kept working 16-hour days designing new diagnostic tools, forging supplier relationships, and expanding our client network across the Pacific Northwest. Derek, meanwhile, polished his public persona. He gave flashy interviews about innovation and accepted awards for entrepreneurship, always basking in the credit for breakthroughs my team and I had delivered. Our revenue kept climbing, eventually topping $50 million annually. But so did the strain between us. Derek began leaving me off critical email threads, calling closed-door meetings, and making sweeping decisions without so much as a phone call. Slowly, I was being edged out of the very company I'd spent my youth building. Then came Dad's 60th birthday, the night everything fell apart. The party was Derek's idea naturally. He booked the grand ballroom at the Four Seasons, turning what should have been a family celebration into a high-profitable networking gala. That was Derek in a nutshell. Everything had to be part of some greater agenda. I arrived early to help the event staff set up, wearing a simple navy dress. Derek gave me a sharp look the moment he saw me. "Couldn't you have tried a little harder?" he whispered. "There are major investors coming tonight." I ignored him and focused on greeting guests as they arrived. The ballroom filled fast, executives, clients, venture capital partners, and family friends all mingling under crystal chandeliers. Derek worked the room like a seasoned politician, while I kept to the edges, quietly ensuring the event ran smoothly. During dinner, Derek tapped his glass and rose for a speech. I braced for the usual sentimental toast to Dad, maybe some childhood anecdotes. Instead, he dropped a bombshell that fractured our world. As we celebrate Dad's 60th birthday, Derek began, his voice carrying across the hushed room. I'd like to share some exciting changes at Lee Tech. My chest tightened. Changes? What changes? For too long, we've been shackled by outdated thinking, Derek continued, locking eyes with me. It's time for new leadership and unified vision. Effective immediately, I'll be taking over as sole CEO. Certain elements that no longer serve our growth will be stepping aside. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as I sat frozen, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. I sat there, frozen, as Derek continued his slick, well-rehearsed speech. An assassination of my character, disguised as a visionary corporate announcement. Some people, he said, his voice oozing false sympathy, are simply better suited to technical roles rather than leadership. My sister, Vanessa, has been adequate in maintaining our legacy systems, but to compete in today's market, we need bold thinking. He paused for effect, scanning the crowd. We need excellence. And frankly, Vanessa, you're just not equipped for this level of business. I turned toward Dad, hoping, praying he'd intervene, that he'd tell Derek to sit down, to show some respect for the person who'd saved the family business. But Dad was nodding along, pride gleaming in his eyes, as if Derek were reading from scripture. Mom stared down at her linen napkin, her hands trembling faintly in her lap. The truth is, Derek pressed on, his voice rising with each word. You're irrelevant in the modern business world, Vanessa. Your old-school ideas and lack of formal business credentials are holding us back. It's time for you to step aside, gracefully. The silence that fell over the ballroom felt suffocating. Hundreds of faces turned toward me, eyes full of curiosity, pity, or worse, quiet glee. Everything I'd sacrificed, every sleepless night, was being ripped away under chandeliers and polite applause. Slowly I stood, my chair scraping across the parquet floor, the harsh sound sliced through the hush like a blade. People braced for a scene, screaming, crying, something dramatic. Instead, I picked up my purse, walked calmly to Dad's table, and set down a small, neatly wrapped package. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said softly. Then I turned and walked out of the ballroom, ignoring the gasps and whispered speculation trailing me like a shadow. Later that night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by patents, design awards, and framed news articles with my name on them. I stared at the dark screen of my laptop, my mind racing. Derek thought he'd won, but he'd forgotten one critical truth. I still controlled the company's most important asset, our technology, and I'd learned more in the trenches of real business than Derek ever had sipping cocktails on Wall Street. A small smile tugged at my lips as I powered up my laptop and started drafting an email. Tomorrow would be interesting. At sunrise, the sky was sharp and blue. I arrived at Lee Tech before anyone else, waiting at my desk with coffee steaming in my mug. At exactly 9 o'clock, Derek swept through the doors, Dad trailing behind him, both wearing smug smiles that were about to vanish. "Vanessa," Derek snapped, surprised to see me. "What are you doing here? I assumed after last night you'd have the sense to stay away." I leaned back, thinking of the email I'd sent at 3 a.m. to every major client, supplier, and staff member. "Just tying up some loose ends, dear brother," I said evenly. "But since you're here, we should definitely talk about the company's future." "There's nothing to discuss," Dad interjected firmly. "If you believe that quiet strength can topple even the loudest betrayals, don't forget to subscribe and join me for the next chapter, where Derek learns the real cost of underestimating me." "Derek's in charge now," Dad said firmly. "The board's already approved it." "Yes, the board," I replied, sliding my tablet onto the table with calm precision. "Let's talk about that for a minute." I tapped the screen connecting my device to the conference room's main monitor. You see, while Derek was busy throwing parties and chasing headlines, I was busy building this company, and there are a few details you both seem to have forgotten. A document popped up on the giant screen, crisp and glaring under the fluorescent lights. First off, let me remind you that I own 51% of LeTech shares. When we incorporated 12 years ago, Dad split the stock evenly between Derek and me, 25% each, keeping the other 50% for himself. Derek let out a short, humorless laugh. That's impossible. Oh, is it? I raised an eyebrow. Because 3 years ago, when we needed cash for our expansion into smart diagnostics, Dad sold me 26% of the company. Remember that day, Dad? You were too busy helping Derek prep for his Tech Disruptor of the Year gala to handle the negotiations yourself, so you signed the paperwork without reading it. The color drained from both their faces. Derek's fingers curled tightly around the edge of the table. That can't be true, he whispered. Dad would never. Oh, but he did, I said, flipping to the next slide. And here's another fun fact. The proprietary technology that generates 80% of LeTech's revenue, it's not actually owned by LeTech. It's owned by my separate entity, Vertex Innovations LLC. I watched Dad sink into his chair, his eyes wide. LeTech only holds a licensing agreement, I continued, which, according to this contract, expires, I glanced at my watch, in about 7 minutes. Dad's face turned ashen. The renewal papers, the ones I asked you to sign last week. The same papers you never read because you were helping Derek plan this little coup. I gave a polite smile. Yes, those papers. I chose not to submit them. Derek lunged forward. You manipulative. Careful, brother, I interrupted, holding up a finger. You might want to hear the rest before you finish that sentence. I pulled up my inbox, revealing dozens of unread emails. While you were announcing my so-called exit last night, I was contacting our clients. Many of our biggest contracts contain personal loyalty clauses. They signed with LeTech because of my work and reputation. And last night I informed them of the leadership change and my departure. I clicked into a folder of email responses. Would you like to know how many clients have already activated their termination clauses? Or how many of our top engineers, who by the way are employed by Vertex Innovations, have already joined my new venture? Outside the glass walls, employees were gathering, phones in hand, whispers spreading like wildfire. Derek's confident mask crumbled as he checked his notifications, his fingers trembling. You can't do this, he stammered. The company you tried to steal from me? I finished for him, my voice steely calm. The one you thought you could just take over because you've got an MBA and Dad's blessing? I shot back, my voice icy calm. That company stopped existing the second you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. I rose slowly, smoothing my navy dress and letting the silence stretch between us. So here are your options. I held up a single finger. Option 1. I walk away. I keep my 51% ownership, my proprietary technology, my clients, and my engineers. LeTech becomes an empty shell, and you can explain to all those important people you schmoozed with last night why the company's valuation dropped to 0 overnight. Dad's face seemed to age 10 years in 10 minutes. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And option 2, he asked, his voice cracking. I raised a second finger. Option 2. You both resign. I take full control of LeTech. You keep your shares, but as silent partners, meaning you receive dividends, but you'll have no influence over operations. Derek gets a generous severance package and glowing references for his next job, ideally far away from Seattle. Derek's face flushed crimson, a vein pulsing at his temple. You planned this for ages, didn't you? He spat. You've been waiting for the perfect moment to stab us in the back. I let out a short laugh, utterly devoid of humor. No, Derek. I spent more than a decade trying to be a loyal daughter and sister, while both of you took me for granted. I built this company from scratch while you basked in praise for achievements that weren't yours. I glanced at my watch again. I only planned this about 12 hours ago, right after you stood up in that ballroom and called me worthless in front of our entire network. My phone buzzed, another client termination notice flashing on the screen. I held it up so they could see. Time's running out. What's it gonna be? The next hour blurred into a flurry of lawyers' conference calls and hastily signed documents. By noon, I sat alone in what was now officially my office, staring out over the sunlit Seattle skyline. Lee Tech, the company I'd devoted my life to, was finally, undeniably mine. Yet the victory felt unexpectedly hollow. Family ties lay in pieces, fragile as shattered glass. That evening, Mom slipped quietly into my office, eyes puffy and red. "Did it have to end like this?" she asked softly. I met her gaze, my voice gentle but resolute. "They gave me no choice, Mom. They would have taken everything I built and left me with nothing." She nodded slowly, sadness weighing her down. "So, what happens now?" I turned my screen toward her, revealing charts and plans for new products and expansions. "Now," I said, a spark in my eyes, "I build something even bigger, this time without caring people who see me as disposable." Over the next year, Lee Tech, under my sole leadership, tripled in value. Derek found work at a startup in San Francisco, humbled and, I hope, wiser. Dad retired, finally realizing that his golden child had nearly destroyed everything he'd worked for. We still see each other at holidays, maintaining polite conversation, though the wounds beneath the surface might never fully heal. Sometimes late at night, I scroll through old family photos, feeling a bittersweet ache for what we lost. But then I remember that night in the grand ballroom, the contempt on Derek's face, and Dad, nodding as my brother tried to erase me from my own legacy. In business and in family, respect isn't given, it's earned. They learned that lesson too late. As for me, I learned that quiet people, the ones dismissed as insignificant, are often the ones you should watch out for. We know how to build something from nothing, and how to take it back when someone tries to steal it. But for now, Lindsay, I have to warn you, all it proves is that there is always hope. The kids. My story spread through Seattle's business circles, a whispered cautionary tale. Now, at industry events, I hear murmurs ripple through the crowd. "That's Vanessa Lee, the one who—" They never finish the sentence. They don't have to. My success speaks for itself. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at Derek's alma mater for their graduation ceremony. The topic? Hidden strengths, the power of underestimated leaders. I accepted, already crafting my speech. After all, I have quite a story to tell. BTech continues to thrive under my leadership. More importantly, I've found peace with my decisions. Sometimes the strongest message is simply proving people wrong, and sometimes the best revenge isn't tearing others down, but rising so high they have no choice but to see the truth. As I write this, overlooking Seattle's skyline, I remember what Mom once told me. Success is the best revenge, but wisdom is knowing when to stop seeking revenge and start seeking growth. She was right. Now, I'm focused on building something meaningful. Something that will outlast family feuds and power plays. I still keep the birthday gift I never gave Dad. A photo album chronicling Lee Tech's journey. Maybe one day, when the wounds have healed enough, I'll finally give it to him. Until then, it reminds me that our greatest strengths often come from the qualities others fail to see. If my story resonates with you, share your thoughts below. I'd love your support and advice. Tell me how you've turned doubt into strength. Remember, never let anyone define your worth. Quiet determination can change everything. Stand tall, build boldly, and prove the world wrong, one victory at a time.